Hello team, welcome to another ATP Geopolitics video with myself, Jonathan M.S. Pearce. This is a Ukraine war news update for the 8th of September 2024. I don't know whether I'm coming or going. Last night was, and I've got twin boys, teenagers. One of them was out at a sleepover. The other one, I was like, right, tonight we're going to have an initiation into this existence we have with you, me, your mum, and I'm going to make you watch Desperado, 1995 Robert Rodriguez film. I'm going to drink some wine, a little bit of port, because this is a very important moment. It's one of the greatest films ever made, and I probably haven't watched it in 20 years, but I watched it like 1,000 times in the 90s, and I watched it with him, and I was like, man, this film holds up. The editing, the music, the script, the cinematography, the acting, the just iconic moments. I could quote most of that film still. Just absolutely loved it last night. It was a real yay. Yeah. Anyway, I'm feeling a little jaded this morning, and poor lad's gone off to rugby now, so I'll go and join him for the match. And that means that my output will be a little bit, I guess, infrequent today. Not in the usual schedule it would be otherwise. Okay, the Russian losses for the day before, as according to General Staff. You can find, though, the caveats that I have to this list in the description below. 1,270 is fairly high on a personnel front. 4 tanks. We saw 1 tank yesterday and 0 AFVs. We have 4 tanks today and 19 troop-carrying AFVs. Don't know whether that was just randomly anomalous, or some people are saying that actually the amount of fuel that has been destroyed in these depots and refineries could mean that they're struggling to get fuel to their troop-carrying AFVs, and some claims are that the Russians are having to walk to get to their positions a lot more than being driven there, and so you might see a lack of air fees as a result of that. But then today we got 19, so I don't know that really works, although we do have a thread on the fuel issues coming later. 30 artillery systems is a slight uptick back up to a fairly hefty level. They're not quite double the daily average, but getting towards that. 2 multiple launch rocket systems, 47 vehicles and fuel tanks. That's there or thereabouts, I guess. 10 pieces of special equipment. So a fairly challenging day in some areas for the Russians. Personnel, they're still losing insane numbers of people every day. Of course, the question is always, well, what is the situation for the Ukrainians? Now, we don't have an Andrew Perpetual loss list yet today. I will check at the end of the video, see if he has brought one out in that time. Just a few things. Here's a Marder 1A3, the German provided infantry fighting vehicle that has been destroyed here, and we can see it's destroyed because I don't think that's working anytime soon. If you look inside the vehicle, it seems to be completely well, I'm trying to work out whether that's melted inside some of it, but there's obviously been a fire inside. You look at the wheels along here and they are completely done over. This bad boy, I mean, in order for that to be brought back to usability, operability, you would have to give it basically a complete overhaul, and I don't think that is one that's particularly reparable. Nonetheless, yeah, it is. It's interesting to see some of these bits of footage, because you get a sense of what, say, Andrew Perpetua is looking at and his team every single day. Something like this, then they'll try and geolocate it, that gets added to the list, and then we get a sense of the comparative losses for each side and the evidence that supports those claims. Okay, over the past few days, Andrew himself says, I have seen an extreme uptick in dud MRL shells coming out of Russian rocket artillery. In other words, when you are seeing visuals of not so much the firing of the multiple launch rocket systems like the Grad, BM-21 Grad or Uragan or whatever, the impacts when you are seeing this probably from drone footage suggests that actually a number of those are hitting the ground and not exploding, which I presume it's that way around, rather than not having rocket propellant and not firing out of the MLRS. But yeah, that could indicate that they are getting, I don't know, that they're getting through their decent stocks and they're now using older ordnance, or maybe they're getting stuff from North Korea that doesn't have the consistency and reliability that they need. I don't know, but an interesting observation from Andrew there. Now here we see a HIMARS strike on a 96 L6E radar of an S400. S400 air surface-to-air missile system, the Triumph system that is basically their best piece of kit for air defense. Some of the crew were killed in this, and the radar itself was severely damaged in the strike. So that is good news for the Ukrainians, hitting a very expensive bit of kit, although it might be an older strike, so not too sure about that. But anyway, could have been, we could have some footage of a new or a newer S400 strike there. Then we have some HIMARS activity. So HIMARS footage seems to be coming out again. You get these peaks and troughs, and I've talked about this before, how I don't know whether this is reflective of a lack of ordnance and ammunition for these HIMARS, that sometimes you see quite a bit of footage and then it goes quiet for a long time, and then you see a lot more, and you're thinking, right, have they just got a load of new ordnance in, or is it fairly consistent but it's just random when you get to see the footage? But anyway, there's quite a bit of HIMARS footage coming out at the moment. This is in the Tourette's direction, and it shows actually 6 pieces of Russian artillery being taken out in that direction. So when we look back at the general staff figures, and the artillery systems are often very high, sometimes 60 odd, sometimes 30 odd, like today, you're thinking, well, it's still a lot of artillery pieces taken out in a single day. Well, actually, here's one video that shows 6 artillery pieces getting taken out in one area by HIMARS. Now, I can't tell you the time frames involved here, whether this is 6 pieces taken out in one day or whether this video is of a couple of weeks worth of work, but artillery is certainly being targeted, and there is video evidence of lots of it getting destroyed. And it's also worthy of note that HIMARS are fairly high value ordnance here. Like, it's not these aren't FPV drones that are taking out pieces of artillery. These are HIMARS which could be used for strikes 84 kilometers back, but they're being used to take out artillery counter-battery fire. So that is how important artillery degradation is for the Ukrainians to do that to the Russians. So yeah, that's the 28th Mechanized Brigade doing that in the Tourette's direction. Okay, then we have another video here of the thermite being dropped. So this is what people are sort of calling dragon drone, Smaug, all sorts of different things being named Dragonfire, even though Dragonfire is also the name of the laser that the British are developing to take out drones at sort of a kilometer range. But anyway, this is another video of the thermite dropping drones being used, and we are seeing them far more frequently. It looks like the Ukrainians have realized that there's an asymmetry there and are hammering that asymmetry as much as possible. Exactly what I said the other day. As soon as you have an advantage over the other side, they're going to catch up eventually. So you've got to make sure that advantage counts as much as possible in a short window of time that you have. And we have another incident of Russia on fire yesterday, smoking off the Gerasimov Institute of Cinematography in Moscow. Around 50 staff and students at the VGIK University escaped when the building was evacuated. Fire on the 5th floor, cause unknown, arson cannot be ruled out. So we've seen this last week a bit of an uptick, I think, in fires in Russia. If you remember, the car park that was engulfed in flames yesterday, killing a few people as well in Moscow. So this is pretty central to Russia, right at the capital. Here's what remains of the car park in Moscow region, which burned down in 10 minutes. 2 people died when police say bitumen being used for resurfacing caught fire and almost instantly spread to cars still parked inside the Odintsovo structure. I have no idea whether it was arson or just a bitumen mistake. Life's a bitumen. Anyway, moving on. Strikes, distant strikes. So last night, again, we have seen a wave of Russian drones, slightly smaller wave, but still 23 Shahed drones. Really consistent the Russians are at the moment in striking into Ukraine with large numbers of Shahed drones. Ukrainian Air Force reported that they shot down one out of the KH-56, 59 or 69 cruise missiles. However, they do also say that the other 3 of those missiles missed their target. So that's basically 0% success rate in terms of intended targets being hit for the Russians. And 15 out of 23 Shahed drones were intercepted. Another 2 fell due to electronic warfare measures. So that's then 17 out of 23. That leaves 6. But there's also the claim, I presume it's out of those 6. Well, I don't know. Maybe the ones that went into Romania eventually came out of Romania and then hit their targets. I don't know. But there's 6 unaccounted for there. And there's a lot of talk about... where do we have it? Yeah. During a Russian drone attack on Odessa, one of the Shahed drones reportedly entered Romanian airspace, according to the Romanian Ministry of Defense. Ukrainian Air Force has confirmed that the drone violated Romanian airspace, prompting the Romanian military to deploy for aircraft, though no further action was taken. So, another example of Russian drones in Romanian airspace. No drones shot down by the Romanians, although they scrambled their planes. There are other claims that a handful of drones were in Romanian airspace, or at least one. So I've seen claims that there was a group, I think it was the word used, a group of drones involved in that. So I don't know, but none of them shot down by the Romanians. I presume they then went back into Ukrainian airspace and carried on their trajectory, their route. All I know is that 6 drones are unaccounted for in the interceptions or electronic warfare losses. So they might have hit their targets. Okay, at night, Russia carried out an airstrike on Sumy. As a result of the strike, a total of 20 houses were damaged, 2 people killed and 4 wounded. Sumy is getting one hell of a battering with these aerial aviation bombs, these guided glide bombs. And they appear to be hitting civilian infrastructure, although I have to say that when you get close to the border in these places, like for example Sumy, in fact I've been close to the border in Sumy in a house, and it was a house used by Ukrainian troops. So when you get really close to the border, as in we were in drone striking distance, so we were, this was the front line for all intents and purposes. The positions that you take are in the houses that are very close to the border that have been abandoned. Although the Ukrainians don't just adopt abandoned houses, they actually rent them and get permission, etc., etc. But I've been in some of those houses and that close to the border. So when you hear 20 houses were damaged in an aerial strike, there is a chance that will be a case of military being in those houses. And the strike does have a military element to it. So, just to give you a bit of a balance there, or it could just be indiscriminate striking at Ukrainian civilian infrastructure. I wouldn't put that past the Russians because they've done that as well. Okay, explosion in Kiev has taken place this morning. I have no idea about it. It's only just sort of being reported. I don't know if that's a successful missile strike or something happening on the ground there. Who knows? But explosion has taken place in Kiev as well as in Belgrade as well. So smoke rising, fairly considerable smoke rising from something that might have been struck by missiles, drones, or something on the ground happening. Who knows? Now, Tim White says, I've been tipped off that another hotel in Ukraine has been struck by a missile. I don't think this one has been covered by the media yet, or it hadn't been. Has now, I think. This is how the Hotel Zarya looks tonight in a village of Mykolaievka near Slovyansk in Donetsk. So Slovyansk, Kramatorsk, that semicircle of cities and towns behind Chasiv Yar and Bakhmut that the Ukrainians control. These are often targeted by the Russians as they slam missiles and ordnance into, again, civilian infrastructure. Is there a military dimension to this? I have no idea, but it's a hotel. And my guess is, rather like other hotels that have been hit recently, it's probably where international journalists are staying. I'm just speculating here. But that is doing the rounds at the moment. It's quite a bit of imagery coming out. Russians destroyed another hotel. say the Euromaidan press. They used carb-guided bombs to strike a hotel in Mykolaiv near Sloviansk. People reportedly may be under the rubble. Recently, the Russian forces attacked multiple hotels, including Sapphire in Kramatorsk, so that's just up the road, on 25th of August, killing a journalist and injuring at least 8 other civilians. So this is probably part of the Russian campaign of, I guess, trying to hit journalists reporting on the war, etc., etc. Right, now onto other bits and pieces. We have a thread here on, as promised, on the Russian fuel situation. So at least 100,000 tons of Russian fuel is estimated to be destroyed in Ukrainian drone attacks. The attacked fuel depots were built underground for protection, but were moved to the surface to save money. Now they may have to be buried again. In August 2024, Ukrainian drones attacked two fuel storage facilities in Russia's Rostov region, the base number 7, known as Atlas, in Kamensky district, and Flagman, formerly Kavkaz, in Prolatarsk. So the Prolatarsk one was absolutely huge, but actually the Atlas one as well, fairly large fire there, but the big one that burned for 16 days was Prolatarsk. The attacks caused massive damage. Satellite photos published by MT Anderson show the extent of damage to Flagman. 15 fuel tanks destroyed, 3 partially damaged, and the status of the other 33 is unknown. At least 3 tanks were destroyed at Atlas. So you can go and see those kind of claims. Let's have a look at these satellite images. So yeah, pretty devastating damage there. The facilities are owned and operated by the Russian state agency Rosreserve, and are used to provide fuel to Russia's southern military district. They store jet fuel, diesel fuel, and other flammable and lubricating materials transported by rail. Each tank has a capacity of 5,000 cubic meters of fuel. Flagman had 32 such tanks, while Atlas had 64. Based on the extent of the destruction, it's likely that 90,000 tons of fuel were destroyed at Flagman and another 15,000 tons at Atlas. That is equivalent to the amount of fuel needed for 1,000 IL-76 transport aircraft, or to refuel Russia's entire tank fleet at least 30 times. Direct financial losses are estimated at over 7 billion rubles, that's $77.8 million, from fuel alone, plus more from the lost facilities. It's also worth mentioning that those facilities are probably unable to ship their fuel that they have that hasn't been damaged at the moment. So I assume that there's a loss of functionality there. You might have an issue with railway logistics at those places. So it could be that, they've lost that amount of fuel, but actually for the time being, they've lost all of the fuel that was there in terms of functionally being able to be provided to the army, but I don't know. The damaged facilities cannot be easily replaced, as there are no alternatives in the Rostov region that can meet the needs of the southern military district. If they cannot be repaired, fuel will need to be transferred from other regions at a substantial cost. The 2 fuel depots were built in 1962 as an emergency response to the Cuban Missile Crisis, when the Soviet government believed that war with NATO was imminent. As they would have been military targets, they were buried underground to protect against enemy attacks. The underground tanks were designed to be virtually bomb-proof, consisting of vertical, low cylindrical structures with a concrete base covered with concrete slabs. The only above-ground element was a structure used for filling the tanks. Over time, however, the underground storage deteriorated due to the saline soil and the infiltration of groundwater. In 2003, new emergency safety requirements were introduced, which neither facility could comply with. Repairing and upgrading them was deemed too expensive. As a result, the Atlas facility moved to the surface in 2019. New tanks with modern equipment were introduced. Kavkaz carried out a similar move starting in the 2000s, taking 15 years to complete. But only 1 week to destroy. And you can see the absolute destruction from the ground here at, I presume, Kavkaz. So, my goodness. Almost certainly due to the wave of Ukrainian attacks, the Russian government has partly lifted the ban on underground fuel storage. A newly published directive exempts facilities subordinate to the Russian Ministry of Defense and other security ministries. So they might be moving their fuel reserves back underground as a result of these strikes by the Ukrainians. If I was the Ukrainians, I'd be trying to hit what's left of these fuel reserves that haven't burned at the other end of the facilities. Anyway, moving on, Russian sources talk about Kursk. Ukraine sent the 11th Brigade NGU to Kursk. This is a second-line brigade, which means that Ukrainian troops are preparing defensive lines in depth. In other words, they're sending troops to Kursk, the Ukrainians at the moment, that wouldn't be used in the front line. They're not offensive troops, they're defensive troops that are used to sitting in trenches and doing defensive work. In other words, they are now digging in the Ukrainians, and they're not looking to give up this territory in a way that was possibly thought. So there are three options when they first started attacking to Kursk that people were analysing. One, you carry on attacking, just attack, take more ground, but at some point you're going to have to stop. So, one, do you defend where you are, exactly where you are, no matter where you are, you just defend everything you've taken. Two, you move back to better defendable lines within the land that you've taken. So you're not just trying to hold on to everything you've got. You're looking at what the land is, what the existing trench networks are that the Russians have built, etc., and you defend at better areas within that ground, but cede some territory. Or three, you just move fully out of Kursk and say, right, we've done that, we took that, we gave you a bloody nose, we attrited some of your forces, and we gave you a bit of a PR nightmare. But actually, we're going to pull back to the border now, and you can have Kursk back, but just let you know that we can do that whenever we want, type thing. And it looks like it's going to be one of the first two options, right? So it looks like the Ukrainians are going to defend Kursk from Russian counterattacks. They've also sent the Ukrainians a 49th Assault Engineer Brigade, which means that they will push further. So that is possibly on the cards as well. Okay. Now, from Geo Insider, last year Russia kept up to 12,000 troops in Belarus. So not in Russia, the country neighboring Russia with Lukashenko, the puppet dictator in charge there, who is helping Russia as much as he can without being too overt, because it's not too popular within Belarus. He's not too popular. He really didn't get elected in last time. They just bodged it, and Putin essentially propped him up. And there were all those issues around the last election. I use as a very dubious way. But anyway, you have had Russian troops in Belarus to some fairly substantial levels, supposedly sort of training the Belarusian army, but basically presenting a threat to Ukraine from Belarus. But now, apparently, there are no more thousands of units there, the spokesman of the State Security Service, Andriy Demchenko, said in a telethon. According to him, during the year, these units were gradually withdrawn to the territory of the Russian Federation. So currently, there are no Russian units that would pose a threat to Ukraine in the neighbouring state. To inflame the situation, Russia periodically brings in Belarusian equipment and a certain number of personnel, but much smaller numbers. The return of 12,000 soldiers on a rotational basis did not take place. So they no longer have those at least 12,000 troops in Belarus. That is probably telling you something. So it tells us, I think, that the Russians don't have enough troops to do that. They need those troops. All of those troops are needed within Russia or in Ukraine. And it shows you that they are perhaps shows you that they are in somewhat desperate straits in terms of personnel. Now, I don't know what to think about this. So basically, the Russians have been seen to be committing a whole bunch of war crimes against Ukrainian POWs. In the last week, we've seen 3 bits of footage that have shown execution of Ukrainian soldiers who have surrendered. And that is disgusting, despicable. So how does Ukraine react to this? And it seems that they have banned phone calls home for Russian POWs in Ukraine to Russia. The decision, says Nexter, was taken in response to the shooting of AFU prisoners of war. The ombudsman says that the Ukrainian side, quote, unfortunately or fortunately, cannot behave like the Russians when dealing with prisoners of war. So it's a difficult situation for the Ukrainians, because on the one hand, they will feel like they should get some retribution. It's a psychological, what in philosophy is called a reactive attitude. You can't help but feel that, and they want to react to that and have an attitude, a retributive attitude to that. But on the other hand, that's not going to serve them very well, because retribution means that they would want to do bad things to the Russians. and that means that they would lose the moral high ground and they would lose international support. And also for its own intrinsic moral value, they just don't want to do that when they're thinking rationally. So what can they do? Well, I think they should just maintain the moral high ground by treating the Russian POWs as well as possible. It would be my position. But here they've kind of gone in the middle, which is, okay, we're going to stop you being able to phone your families and whatnot back in Russia. Well, actually, that's quite a useful PR, I think, component of the information war with Russia, or the hearts and minds war with Russia. So if Russian POWs are able to phone their families and say, look, we're being treated well, I'm all right, I'm alive, then actually that spreads information to Russia that the Ukrainians aren't that bad, that actually they're doing the right moral thing, etc., etc. So I don't know, I'm unsure about this. But anyway, that's their reaction to the horrors of the Russian war crimes. What a bizarre thing to see here. So these are beachgoers in Russia off Sochi, right? They found a sea mine. It's just absolutely unbelievable. And for some reason, with their bare hands, they decide that it will be a good idea to roll it up the Pebble Beach while a bunch of beachgoers are standing around watching, and while a few other people come along to help. Oh, do you know what? I'll give you a hand there. What is this? Oh, it's a massive explosive device that as a result of the war just gone over there. Oh, brilliant. Yeah, should we just roll this with all its triggers and whatnot on the outside, or just hope that it's a magnetic mine and there's no bits of big metal lying under the beach? Let's just roll it up the beach and everyone else can hang around watching. Yeah, that's a good idea. What are you doing, guys? Oh, let's get a closer look, guys. Yeah, has anyone got a camera? Yeah, let's film this. Oh, this is brilliant. I mean, luckily for them, of course, it doesn't explode, but you're dicing with death there. It's just insane. Anyway, there you go. Right. Final thing I'm going to say, just a bit of a shameless plug, really. It's not a crazy amount of news in today's video. So thank you so much here to, I think this is Kevin. Yeah, Kevin Forst, saying, good morning, everyone. I am very sorry, but I need to get another shameless plug for one of JP's books. I bought the Johnny Pierce book, The Family Book of Word of the Day. And here it is, guys. Look, the Family Book of Word of the Day. For a year, every year, forever. It's not just for the year it was written in. You can use this book every year. And it's got lots of words in, lots of big words. He says, for my little nephews, ages 6 and 8, my sister's been teaching them one new vocabulary word each day. By the way, it's for all ages. Now they are telling their friends that we know very important words. I can't wait until their teachers experience the new vocabulary. Thanks, JP, for helping me to enforce my nickname, which is the greatest uncle in all of known space. Sorry about the shameless plug, guys, but JP's books are available at fine booksellers everywhere. This is all true. Thank you. You can go and grab that, even though it's not quite Christmas. Anyway, take care, guys, and just let it be known that this video is sponsored by Big Words. I'll speak to you soon. Toodle pips.